At 14, my dad left me in a sterile hospital waiting room, handed me a single $20 bill, and whispered, "Don't follow us." My stepmother stood behind him, smirking, after framing me for a crisis she created. They drove away, leaving me to face a mountain of blame entirely alone. But the real story didn't start until a nurse named Eleanor approached me to check my vitals. The moment she pulled back my sleeve and saw the distinct, faded mark on my right shoulder, the exact shape of a crescent moon, she completely froze. Her clipboard slipped from her hands, clattering loudly against the linoleum floor. She stared at my face, her breath catching in her throat, before whispering a name I had never heard in my entire life. That single second didn't just expose my stepmother's lies, it shattered everything I thought I knew about my identity. My name is Chloe, and today I am 26 years old. For the longest time, I believed that blood was the strongest bond in the world, but a cold hospital waiting room taught me otherwise. My childhood ended abruptly at 14, but the foundation for that ruin was laid years earlier when my biological mother passed away. Soon after, my father married Linda. Linda brought her own son into our home, a boy named Austin who was a year younger than me. To my father, Austin quickly became the golden boy, the son he had always wanted but never had. Linda was a master of subtle manipulation, projecting a perfect image of a caring stepmother to the outside world while ensuring I felt like an outsider in my own home. I became the convenient scapegoat for every broken dish, every missed curfew, and every unexplained tension in the house. My father, blinded by his desire for a fresh start, eagerly accepted Linda's version of reality over mine. I learned to keep my head down, retreating into the background of my own life just to survive the emotional freeze. I watched my father gradually replace my mother's photographs, erase her memory, and slowly but surely, erase me. Austin was given the best bedroom, the newest gadgets, and unconditional praise, while my existence was reduced to chores and quiet compliance. I spent years trying to earn back a fraction of the love my father used to give me freely, entirely unaware that the family I was fighting for was built on a foundation of absolute lies. The breaking point arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, an ordinary day that Linda turned into a trap. I was in my room studying when I heard Austin yelling down the hallway. He had been playing with a heavy, antique porcelain vase that belonged to my late mother, one of the few items of hers I had managed to save from Linda's spring cleaning. I rushed out into the hallway just in time to see Austin holding it over the banister at the top of the stairs, a malicious smirk on his face. "Let's see if this old junk can fly, Chloe," he taunted. Panic surged through me, and I lunged forward, desperate to grab the vase before it shattered. But I never even touched him. The moment I got close, Austin deliberately dropped the vase, letting it crash violently down the wooden steps. In the very same second, he threw his own body backward, tumbling down the first few stairs before catching himself on the landing. He screamed at the top of his lungs, a calculated, theatrical wail of agony. Linda materialized instantly at the bottom of the stairs, as if she had been waiting for the cue. She didn't check on Austin first. Instead, her eyes snapped up to me, burning with a terrifying, triumphant malice. When my father burst through the front door moments later, Linda was already sobbing hysterically, cradling Austin and screaming that I had tried to kill her son. The drive to the hospital was a blur of flashing rain and suffocating silence. Austin lay across the back seat, whimpering softly, while Linda kept a firm, protective grip on his shoulder, occasionally shooting me glares of pure venom through the rearview mirror. My father gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Every attempt I made to explain what had actually happened was instantly cut off by his sharp, furious commands to shut my mouth. I felt entirely invisible, trapped in a vehicle with 3 people who had already decided I was a monster. When we finally pulled up to the emergency room entrance, the chaos escalated. Nurses rushed out with a wheelchair, and Linda practically threw herself out of the car, loudly detailing the apparent severity of Austin's injuries to the medical staff. My father helped them guide the wheelchair inside, leaving me to trail behind them like an unwanted shadow. Once inside the bright, sterile waiting room, the heavy smell of antiseptic mixed with the deep dread pooling in my stomach. My father turned to me, his face twisted into a mask of disgust I had never seen before. He pulled a single, crumpled $20 bill from his wallet and thrust it roughly into my hand. "Don't follow us," he whispered, his voice dangerously low and devoid of any parental warmth. "Linda is right. You're a danger to this family, Chloe. Sit here, don't move, and figure out your next steps, because you aren't coming back home with us." He turned on his heel and walked through the double doors, leaving me completely abandoned. I sat frozen on the cold plastic chair, the crumpled $20 bill burning a hole in my palm as the automatic doors slid shut behind my father. The finality of his words echoed in my ears, cutting deeper than any physical blow ever could. I was 14, completely alone, and discarded by the only family I had left. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of tears and hospital announcements. Eventually, a nurse with graying hair and a gentle demeanor approached my corner. Her badge read Eleanor. She knelt down beside me, offering a warm cup of water and asking softly why a young girl was sitting alone for so long. As I reached out to take the cup, my oversized jacket slipped down my right shoulder, exposing my arm. Eleanor's eyes adjusted to the bright fluorescent lights, landing directly on the distinct, faded mark near my shoulder blade, a perfect, dark birthmark in the shape of a crescent moon. The moment she saw it, she completely froze. The clipboard she was holding slipped from her fingers, clattering loudly against the hard linoleum floor, sending papers scattering everywhere. She didn't even bother to pick them up. Her breath caught sharply in her throat, and the color rapidly drained from her face until she was as pale as the hospital sheets. She reached out, her hand trembling violently as she hovered it just inches above my arm, staring at me with a mixture of profound shock and rising tears. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of an immense, sudden realization. She looked up from the birthmark, searching my eyes, my nose, the structure of my jawline, as if she were looking at a ghost. "It's you. It's really you." She whispered a name I had never heard before, a name that belonged to a missing child. Before I could even process the absolute panic in Eleanor's eyes, she hurried me away from the public waiting room and into a private, quiet office. She explained, through tears, that 14 years ago, a newborn baby girl had been stolen right from the maternity ward of this exact hospital. The mother had been devastated, keeping the search alive for years, and the most defining detail on the police flyers had been that distinct crescent moon birthmark. Within minutes, social services and a hospital administrator were brought into the room, their faces grave. They quietly explained that they needed to run an emergency DNA test to confirm her suspicion, promising me that I was safe and wouldn't be forced to leave with the man I called my father. While I waited in protective custody, the authorities began digging into the legal records. By the next morning, the preliminary results were in, and the truth shattered my entire reality. The man who had raised me was not my biological father at all. He had never been married to the woman I thought was my late mother. In reality, he had abducted me as an infant from this very hospital during a chaotic shift change, using me as a pawn to extort money and force a fraudulent custody settlement from a wealthy family. Linda had discovered the truth years ago, using the secret to hold total control over him while systematically weaponizing it to ensure I was completely pushed out of the picture. The family I had spent my entire youth trying desperately to please was nothing more than a carefully constructed web of criminal lies. The trap slammed shut the very next afternoon when my father and Linda finally walked out of the pediatric ward, entirely unaware that their world was about to collapse. They had Austin in a wheelchair, ready to head out to the parking lot and drive home to their perfect, stolen life, but the hospital exit was already blocked. Two plainclothes detectives stepped into their path, flashing their badges, while uniform officers closed in from behind. I stood a few yards away, sheltered behind a glass partition next to Eleanor, watching the sudden terror wash over my father's face. Linda immediately began her usual routine, shrieking hysterically and demanding to know why they were being harassed, but her loud protests were cut short the moment the lead detective read out the charges: kidnapping, identity fraud, and child endangerment. My father's knees buckled right there on the linoleum floor. He looked frantically around the lobby, his eyes locking onto mine for one final, desperate second, but there was no more power in his gaze, only the pathetic realization that he had been caught. As the handcuffs clicked into place around his wrists, Linda screamed at him to say something, but he remained utterly silent. They were led away in police cruisers, stripped of their arrogance and their stolen freedom. In a matter of minutes, the abusers who had controlled my entire existence were reduced to nothing more than common criminals facing decades behind bars. Today, at 26, I look back at that $20 bill as the price of my freedom. I was reunited with my real maternal family, who had never stopped praying for my return, and for the past 12 years, I have finally known what unconditional love feels like. My biological father and Linda are currently serving lengthy federal prison sentences, stripped of the life they stole from me. Now, I am curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you discovered your entire childhood was built on a lie? Comment the city you are watching from below, and let me know your thoughts. Meanwhile, I am leaving 2 other incredible stories on the screen that will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until the very end.